to attest that Shoah is due to secularism. She says the following, I'm quoting, "Those who conclude that because of the terrible events of our time, we should turn back to religion for political reasons seem to show as little faith in God as their opponents." So to use religion for political means is as nihilistic as to be nihilist. So she didn't want to use religion as a political weapon. After the Shoah, whose horror still defies rationality, including the rationality at the heart of psychoanalysis, the last but not the least enigma which the third millennium, in its galloping globalization, confronts us with, concerns the mutation of the status of the singular subject itself, which, whatever its form, was constituted in the wake of Greek, Jewish, Christian tradition, with the figure of the father that I tried to briefly examine, and the submission of the mother to it, of course. The disruption of the Oedipal structures in the recomposed family, in the complex context of the weakening of the paternal authority, the assertion of the psychic bisexuality of the two sexes, and assisted reproductions, etc., don't really abolish, to my mind, the universality of anthropological constants such as were discovered and set down by monotheist religions, and which psychoanalytic experiences since Freud have been trying to elucidate. These disruptions, however, oblige us to confront with a combination of firmness and tolerance both the ethical codes needed for the subject autonomy and thought, which were crystallized in the stride of this tradition and to its rupture, I mean the tradition of monotheism, but also to consider the importance of their transgressive, rebellious, queer and impure contingency flourishing in the third millennium. Not to be blind only by the importance of the ethical categories that these monotheistic traditions bring to us, but try to modify, to model them in the frame of the transgressive, rebellious and queer contingencies that we feel emit now. A new fact becomes very obvious. Modern secularization and its new technique asserts these transgressions not as perversions of Oedipus, of law, of symbolic order, etc., but as innovations to invent new kinship, new families, and new legalities. You have to consider what is called perversion as an attempt to renew these old monotheistic rules. On the one hand, people whose psychic life has been formed by different religious frameworks, Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, Shintoism, animism, etc., and who don't seem to share the same logic of libertarian singularity that we have elaborated through Judaism and Christianity. Yet, due to globalization, those people are also attracted by certain ideas given by our civilization. And they are in a crossroad between their own legacy and our old traditions. All continually developed by psychoanalysis. All these phenomena push us strongly to rethink this discovery, hence tragic trials of Oedipus, for example, among others. In a context where religions shy away rather than welcome these challenges, it is up to psychoanalysis to interpret these differences beyond the clash of religions, and to assure their respect as well as the defense and the illustration of this model of individuation and human freedom, of which our therapeutic experience reveals the fecund complexity for the individual and collective fulfillment. This is the heritage that tradition has handed down to us, and of which psychoanalysis is the rebellious child who knows how to pay his debt. Recently, I presided at an international standing forum on religions organized by the Psychology Department of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and the Israeli Psychoanalytic Association. It was, and it is still, because we'll hold it again next year, an interdisciplinary institution which aims to examine religious phenomena from a secular perspective. It is an approach that we could maybe continue to pursue with the Freud Museum in Vienna. So, Greek, Jewish, Christian civilization alone continues on from rupture to rupture, while breaking with the great tradition. I'm quoting here from Tocqueville and Arendt. They say, "Le fil de la tradition est rompu." Today, we know that this broken course, giving rise and Freudian discovery is generated by this broken course. But today we know how many difficulties we have to reach the new courses that appear after these broken threads, and how the extravagant freedom that we achieved by breaking the course of tradition can bring more precious freedom, but also a lot of obscurantism and also abuses. God is not necessary, in fact, but the need to believe is, to my understanding, both a pre-religious and pre-political anthropological necessity. An example, I have discovered that the illusion of eternal life can attenuate a fear of death and turn a Carmelite named Saint Teresa of Avila, you mentioned that my last book is about her, into an ecstatic writer who analyzed herself. She had the impression that the eternal other said to her, "Look for yourself and me." And then she began to analyze herself and appears to us as somebody that is maybe one of the precursors of the psychoanalytic introspection. And finally she transformed herself not into a religious woman, but into a writer, and finally into a businesswoman, as she said, by transforming the politics of the church. But on the other hand, this is a positive aspect of the usage of forces of monotheism. But on the other hand, present and past history teaches me that the promise of absolute love, lavished by an ideal God and Father, suits the sadomasochistic rivalries of brothers when it doesn't sharpen them into death in different kamikaze or suicidal bombing events. And I question myself, sharing the following conviction. Because secularization alone was able to cut the course of tradition, can we finally reflect on all traditions without ecumenism, but putting them into perspective and hearing how they resonate to each other? What encourages me to think that after the secularization, and only through secularization, and because of the secularization, we can go back to the tradition, try to interpret it, and to take out of it the fertile moments in order to continue a refundation of civilization, is the following. You know that in the 20s and the 50s of the 20th century, after Freud, there were two important moments of the Jewish modernity, theological and philosophical one. One of them is called the normative modernity. It began with Hermann Cohen's Religion of Reason out of the Sources of Judaism, and Franz Rosenzweig, The Star of Redemption, and it was developed in the 50s with the rebirth of Jewish thought in France, notably by Levinas. This is what is called normative modernity, the interpretation of the tradition on the background of phenomenology. And the other one is the critical modernity, which we associate with names of Kafka, Walter Benjamin, and Hannah Arendt. This leads me in turn to propose a third possibility, one